Hello everyone, and welcome to video number 1 of the series on how I play Footy Blast. So just before, I'm going to give the caveats, it will be the last time I do it. Footy Blast is not part of the Play Games catalogue. It is a game created by a gentleman called Chris Wiseman, and once you've watched this or the series, if you're interested in having a go at this game, then you can find him on the Delphi forums. Look for Footy Blast, and the game is in development, so obviously the rules are changing as we go along. There's been a couple of rule changes. If you think of something that is going to improve the game from an Aussie rules football point of view, then I'm sure Chris would love to hear from you, and if it's a good enough change to the game or addition to the game, I'm sure he'll consider it. This mat is something that I've designed, and again, if you want a copy of this mat, then if you contact me, I'll send you the image and you can get it printed. So let's talk about Aussie rules football first. It's a game played on an oval field the size of a cricket pitch. There are 18 players in each team on the field, 6 defenders, 6 midfielders, 6 forwards. You have what are called 4 interchange players, which will be substitutes, and they're much like ice hockey, where they can come on and go off, and they also have 1 emergency player who can come on if somebody is injured and taken out of the game. The idea, like any other game, is to score more points than your opponent, and you score points in this game by kicking the ball through the posts, which are located at the end of the fields. There's 4 posts, 2 inner posts which are taller than the 2 outer posts. If the ball goes through the inner post, it's a goal and you get 6 points. If the ball goes through the outer posts, or if it hits the inner post, or if it is touched by an opponent before it goes through the inner posts, then you get 1 point. And if I just lay this down, you probably see scores like this: Melbourne 8-6-54, that's 8 goals, 6 behinds, and so it's 6 8s plus 6, 54, and Fremantle 4-8-32, that's 4 goals, 8 behinds, 32 points. And it's a very, very high octane, fast action game. Plenty of videos on YouTube if you want to actually watch a real game. But effectively, that is the game of Australian rules football. The second part of this video is going to be showing you what you get with Footy Blast, so join me shortly for that. So, Footy Blast, as I said before, it's a game in development, and it's a very, very good game. I have to say, this is probably my most favourite game that I've got, and I've got a lot of games, a lot of sports simulation games. It's PDF only. You get the rule book, which is 6 pages. You get 2 team boards, and I've put home and away along on those, because there is actually a difference, and it's a really, really good design by Chris. The home team, you have defence, midfield, forwards. The away team, you have forwards, midfields, defenders, because a lot of the action takes place between either one section of the team or one player from a section of the team, and it's usually forward against defence, mid against mid, or defence against forward. So he's set up the board so that they're across from each other. The other good thing about it is it allows you to use something, and I use a decider die as where the ball is. So if it's a centre there, it's in there, and if it ends up with the away team's midfield, I can put it on this side and I can move it to there, so I know where the ball is, and so that's one good thing. You get those two. Along with that, there are 3 charts, and this is where you think to yourself, it looks like one of the Get Play games, because you get an action chart, and it is built around Hockey Blast, Soccer Blast, and I forgot to say in the caveats that Keith is aware and he's happy that this is being developed and the name can be kept as Footy Blast. So you get the action chart, you get referees miss chart, throwing and bounce chart, and the kick at goal chart, and you get the highlight reel and the rare plays. You also get score sheets, and this is a score sheet. It's the one that you get looks like this. The only difference is that I've put the yellow lines in here because this helps you with the substitutions. You substitute every 10 minutes, and you fill it in the way, whatever way you want to, like you do with any of the play games. And then apart from that, you need the dice. So if you look at this chart, it shows you up there are 7 dice that you need. Now it's actually been increased because there's been an additional rule added, which we'll go through in one of the videos. You don't actually need, that one there is the one that I use for possession, so you don't actually need that, you just need something to mark for possession. These 2 dice, the 2 d10s, are used when deciding on a player who may be taking a kick or maybe involved in a missed kick. That 20-sided dice is used for a rule that isn't actually in the rule book yet, but we're trying that out, and that will come later. And then you get the 7 dice. You can play this game with 2 dice as long as you can keep track. It's just that if you've got the coloured dice, it helps you because each chart tells you what colour to throw. So 2 yellows, a white, a green, blue, black, red if you've got them. The other thing you're going to need is these little puppies. Counters. You need that to know who's been substituted, and there are 36 places on the field. You don't need 36 chips. One is the major coloured ones, which in my case are blue, are for the players that come off the field and rested and then come back on again, so you know they've had their 10 minutes rest. I use 4 green ones for when the interchange players are on from one side, and 4 yellow ones from the interchange players are on the other side. And in the substitutions video that is going to come up, I'll show you how that how they work, because it's rather important that you know who the interchange players are. So that is really everything that you need. If you want some pawns, you can have some pawns to help you keep a track of who's got the ball, blah blah blah. So that is the introduction to how Australian rules football play is played and what you get with Footy Blast. So hopefully you'll join me for video number 2, which will be talking about how you set up a game. So welcome to video number 2 in this how I play Footy Blast, and we're dealing here with the setting up of the game. So the game is played over 4 quarters of 20 minutes, and you have 18 players on the field. You have 4 interchange players, which are these players here, and the substitute for any injuries, who's known as the emergency player. The way you set your team or players up is totally up to you. There are several ways. I'm doing a 2021 replay, and I'm actually using the as played lineups. There is a website out there if anybody wants to know about it and use that website, I can give that information. But effectively you have 6 forwards, 6 midfields and 6 defenders, and some players can play midfield and forward or midfield and defence, yada yada yada. This player here, M/R, he is a ruck player. He gets involved in the rucks and that becomes important. So you split them up into 6, 6 and 6. There's nothing to say that you cannot play somebody out of position. It doesn't detriment them. But what you tend to look, if you look at the numbers up here, which are the numbers that will be generated by these two D10s, you'll see that the range is higher on the left hand side than it is on the right hand side. So by inference you need to put your better starred players, your better kicking players, over to the left. The 4 substitutes I've just put on the side because that's where I like to keep them, as well as the substitute player. But how you pick the 18 players and the 4 interchange and the emergency player, you can just look at all the players and pick which ones you want, and that will be fine. Or if you notice, each player has got a number at the bottom here, so you could take each player and roll the 2 D10s, and if that number is underneath the number that says play, then he's eligible to play. So you can roll it for every single player, work out who is eligible, and from that you work out who you want to play. If you don't get enough players, if you don't get 23 players, then up to you. You can just pick the ones that are left out of the ones that didn't make it, or you can roll again until you get enough. The only rule that you have to follow is that in your interchange players you must have a forward, a defender and a midfielder, at least one of them. So obviously if you've got a midfield forward, then they're covered by covers 2 positions. Obviously if you're doing a as lined up replay like I am, that really goes out the window because it's whoever's was playing. So that's how you set up. You would work out your lineups, either pick them as you want, use the play number, or get an as played list. Just going back to these boards here, these numbers are the ones that tell you what the player is when it's requested. The 1 to 6 here gives you the positions that you'll see off some of the actions that take place. And once you've done this and you've done it for both teams, you're ready to go. So hopefully you'll join me for number 3, which will probably be how substitutes work. Welcome to this video on substitutions or interchange players in Footy Blast. I think I showed you this in video 1, the score sheet. It's what you get with the game. I've enhanced it and put these yellow line boxes in to indicate that it's time to do an interchange, and it's always at the start of a period or at the start of the 11th minute, with the exception of if you have a ground blast that would take it over that line, then you would do the ground blast and then do the interchange. So here we go. We're just going to use Sydney, and you'll see the reason why I'm using different coloured wherever they are. I use 4 for the home team interchange players, 4 for the away team interchange players, and then a load of blue ones in my case for the starters. So we get to 11 minutes and we decide that we're going to take some players off. Let's have a look what we've got. Might as well do it right. Let's just zoom out a bit so you can see the 4 at the bottom. So if I push that up a bit, push those up, these are the interchange players that have come off over here. We've got a forward. As you can see, we've got forward, midfield, midfield, forward, midfield, because this isn't as lined up. If you were playing it where you were choosing your own players, you must have a defender, midfield and forward, but this is the way it is. As you can see here, defensive midfield, you can move him back. So let's say we take this guy off and we bring McDonald on. So we put a green chip on him because he is an interchange player. We'll take 2 midfielders off. Let's take him off and him off. And we're going to bring Campbell on, interchange player. Warner on, interchange player. And let's say we're going to take this guy off, move him to the defense, and he is an interchange player as well. So there we have the first interchange. So we play to the end of the first period, and at the beginning of the second period we have to bring those 4 players back on. So we look at the 4 players and we go, right, Sam Reed is coming back on. I'm going to take Isaac Heaney off. So we put Reed in and we put a blue chip in. Now also note, he's got 3 stars, he's got 2, so he's got a better chance of scoring, so you move him up because he's got a better range to score in. We've got a midfielder here. Let's take Blakey off. We've got a defensive or forward player here, so let's take Hewitt off. And this is to start the second half, remember. And then we've got another mid player here, but I'm going to stick him in defence for the moment. So now what we have at the start of the second player is we've got the 4 interchange players and 4 rested players, and we would play another 4 minutes, another 10 minutes, and so we're at the 11th minute of the second half of the second quarter, and these 4 players would then come back on again, and we do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to run through it. I'm not going to keep mentioning who they are. So we bring these 4 players on, and again I'm not taking a great deal of notice of what the stars are. It's just trying to show you how this process works. So these players, that's the setup until the end of the first half, end of the second period, and this is where these 4 chips come in handy, because at the start of the second period you go back to your starting lineup. So these players will come back off, the green chips will come off, and we'll put the rested players back on. And again, I'm not taking notice of whether I'm putting them in the right place, I'm just giving you the process. So now what you've got at the start of the second half is your interchange players are back on the bench, and you've got your starting lineup again. So we go through to the 11th minute of the third period, and the interchange players come back on, and again we take players that have not yet rested, and the green chips come back on because they are the interchange players, they're not the starters. And here we are for the second period of the game. So for the second part of the third period, and we come to the end of the third period, and this is where it becomes interesting because there's only 2 players left to rest. So he comes off and he comes off, and at this point what I do is I take all my blue chip players off, because everybody that's not an interchange player, when we start the fourth period, has rested, so they're all okay to play. So they get rid of the chips, you don't need them in your way. And then fill in the 2 spaces, and the other 2 that come off are going to be 2 of the 4 interchange players. And there you have it. We're ready to start the 4th period, and at the 11th minute of the 4th period, the other 2 players will come on, the 2 interchange players will go off, and the last part of your game is played with the starting lineups. And so that is why different coloured chips are very useful for the interchange players in helping you do your substitutions. So now we're beginning to get into the nitty-gritty of the actual game itself when you're playing it. Obviously you've got an opponent set up on the other side, and most of the actions that occur will say something like one player from wherever the ball is. So if I place my little ball marker there, so it will be the defence of Sydney, the offence of the team that they were playing. And there are 2 things that could happen that would lead to a challenge, and that is that you get something like a tackle, which is a one-on-one situation, and the black and white dice will be used to name those. We'll come into that later, but they relate to the numbers along the top. So if it was black's 2, white 4, it would be George Hewitt against whoever is in the offense white 4 position of the opponents, and it will then say what type of trait we're looking for. It could be skill, tackle, clear, 1% disposal or star, and it could be different for both players, one for the offense, one for the defense. The way these things work is that if it's skill against 1%, then the skill is the first, so it's the offensive skill against the 1% skill of the defense. And there's 2 ways of playing a challenge. You can say, okay, if they are equal, then the offensive team win that challenge, or if whoever's got the highest rate for the traits wins that game, wins that challenge. And it's similar for if it's a team like a scramble. It could say scramble skill, and you would add up skill along here for the defense and add up skill along here for the offense, and whoever's got the highest will win. If they're tied, then the team on offense win. There is an advanced rule which I use, and it requires the red dice, and really this is all what the red dice is used for. If you're not playing an advanced rule, then the only other time this will be used is in when there's a centre bounce or a throw-in. And effectively what you do is, if they are tied, then offense would win it, and you roll this dice, and if it's between 1 and 4, then the challenge is correct. It is going to be the offensive team. If it's a 5 or 6, then you reverse it and give it to the defensive team. That is the team who have the ball and the team who don't have the ball, not the offense and defense. It's the forwards and defenders. It gets a bit confusing talking about offense and defense, but in this instance it's the team with the ball. If the team has a 1 advantage, then again it's 1 to 4. You roll this dice, and 1 to 4 is the team with the advantage on the traits, and if it's 5 and 6, it's the team that don't have the advantage who win the challenge. Anything over 1, so sorry, any 2 or over, because some of these are halves, 2 or over, then this roll would be 1 to 5. So the only way that it could overturn would be a 6. So there's your options that you have on challenges. You can just play it simply and say tied goes to the team that are with the ball, otherwise whoever's got the better gets the challenge. Or you can use the advanced rule and roll the dice. Even or 1 is 1 to 4. Anything over 2 is 1 to 5. Kicking and scoring. That is our next topic, and for this we need to look at the cards, and kicking is done using the stars. So you may notice that Franklin here's got 5 stars, Heaney's got 3, Papa's got 4, and they're all filled in. McInerney, anybody who's got a 1, Blakey, Hickey, they're not filled in, and there's a reason for that, and it will be explained more in the ground blast video. But it also can affect penalties should Chris decide on the rule that I came up with to sort of improve the game from my point of view. But you'll get to that when we get to marks and what's all to do with kicks, ground blast, penalties and ground blast. So what you do is, obviously at some point a player will be designated as having a kick, and let's take Franklin. Now to resolve a kick you need 4 dice. Again, you don't have to have 4 dice, you can use 2. You definitely need 2 because you need to add something up if he misses. But in the game, if you use the colours that they say, you use the 2 yellows, the green and the black dice. And you may need this chart. As you can see here, it says kick at goal, green dice. If the number is less than or equal to the goal rating, which is the number of stars, it's a goal. If it's greater than the goal rating, then you go to the miss chart, which is this. So let's deal with this guy here, Franklin. We roll a dice, green dice, 2, less than his 5 stars, so he's scored a goal, and that's it. So it's a goal, 6 points to Sydney. Let's suppose that for some reason Blakey had it, or even Rampy had it. He's got no stars, he cannot score a goal off the green dice. So if it's a 2 and it's Blakey or Rampy, or if we were on Franklin and it was a 6, he would miss the goal. So you then, let's roll these dice here, you then go to this chart, the missed chart, and as you can see, 2 yellow dice, 1 black dice, and it says 5 and a 6 black dice. So if you look down at 5, it says scramble in front of goal, defender gets a hand on it and knocks it through the goalpost. So it's a behind because the defender has touched the ball before it's gone through the post. So Franklin would get a behind, 1 point. Now obviously, as you can see here, short kick, goal line, video review, muffed kick, all depend on the black dice. So let's say we had a video review. The black dice is a 6, so this would have been a 10. Would have rolled 2 5s, let's say 10 6. So a video review and a 6 is a behind for the kicker, so Franklin would have got a behind. Had he got a 1 to 3, it would have been a goal after the review. And this is how people like Rampy can score a goal. They haven't got a star, so they can't score it off the green dice, but they will get a chance to roll on the miss chart and score at least a behind, or maybe even not get anything, because as you can see here, goal line, if you roll a 4-6, no score, defensive position in D50, so the defensive team would take over, and there's a few of those where you don't get anything. So that's all there is to scoring. It's, if the stars are less than the green dice, then great, it's a goal. If it's greater than the green dice, then you have to go and roll on the miss chart. I'll just mention here the blast, the ground blast. If you get a ground blast and you're lucky enough to be the winner of the ground blast, you will get an automatic kick, and the player who is decided, which uses these dice, so let's say 22 here, would be Heaney. If he has 1 star on a blast, you must have somebody with a star. So if you roll these numbers and it comes up with Rampy, he cannot be the one. You roll it again until you get a star, but that will be covered more in the ground blast. But if he's got a 1 star, and this is why it's not filled in, you get an additional 1, so he will be rolling a 2 for the green dice, so a 2 would be a goal for him on a ground blast. If he's got more than 1 star, then you get 2 extra. So Franklin here has got 5, he would have 7, so it's automatically a goal for Franklin on a ground blast. And that is scoring in Footy Blast. I missed a very important new rule that we've been trying out after scoring a behind. As you'll be aware if you've watched the scoring video, when you score a goal you always go to the centre and you always start with a centre bounce to continue the game. If you score a behind, then you always start with the team that scored against in their defensive 50. The current rule, as it's written in the rule book, says you roll the 2 yellow dice and you pick up the action from there, but there's been a change to the rule that we're trying out, see what it's like, and I'll show you I've actually written it on my action chart and it's down here. After a behind, you roll a d20 dice and that will determine what the defense will do. If it's a 1 to 10, you will try a mark from the defense to the midfield. If it's an 11 to 15, you will try a mark from the defense to the defense, so your defender to defender. And if it's a 16 to 20, you would then just play the standard action roll. I've tried this and it makes the game an awful lot more interesting, because obviously if you get a mark that's complete, you can then try marking on to move to the midfield and then to the forward. It moves the team very quickly from defense to forward to try and score. So that is an addendum to the scoring on the options you have if a behind is scored. So each quarter and after each goal, not behind, the game is restarted with a centre bounce from the official. Now there's also a situation where around the corner here, if the ball goes out of play, it will be thrown in by an official from the sideline, and the rules are identical. So we're going to cover here the centre bounce and action 10, which is the throw-in. So action chart 10, out of bounds, go to bounce and throw-in chart. So the bounce and throwing chart is an extremely simple chart. There are only 6 options. This is the throwing and bounce chart here. The 3 ones in red and the 3 ones in black. You use the blue and the red dice in this if necessary. This is the only time, if you're not going to use the red dice for a challenge, that you should need the red dice. So the center bounce is a neutral bounce, so nobody has possession. You just roll it and you take the number, and if it has a red circle, it means that you're going to need the red dice. So effectively, if you roll a 4, 5 or 6, then the center bounce would go to the trailing team, and if they're tied, it goes to the home team, or 5 and 6 will go to the home team in the zone that they are in. If you roll a 1, 2 or a 3, then you have a rook, and these are where your rook players come in. If I just slide this chart back, this thing back here, each player has got a rook rating, and it doesn't matter where on the field it is. If you're in the forward, defensive or mid zone, you take the highest rook player, and normally it's one with an R on. So he's got a 3. You look at the other team's highest rook, and it doesn't matter where he is, he doesn't have to be in midfield, and that is what he's challenging again. If it's 3, then it's tied and it would be the home team. If it's a 4, then the away team wins, and you can leave it at that, or you can use the red dice, roll the challenge, and you've got the 1 to 4, 1 to 5, dependent on whether there's only 1 or 2 difference. So if you want to use the advanced challenge, then there is a video earlier on the advanced challenge, or you can just say he's got better than him, he gets the win, and just play like that. But that's the only time you need the red dice, if it's a 1 to a 3. Now if it's a 1, this chart specifically says advance to the next zone. So if it's a centre bounce and you rolled a 1 and you win, you're going into the forward 50 zone. And if you're in the forward 50 zone, you get a kick, and that green tick there tells you that you have to roll the 2 red dice to see who takes the kick. In this case 49. So if Sydney would have won, you look on here, 49 would be Samuel Wicks, because he's 45 to 52. So if you're in the offensive zone and you win, because it's come from an out of bounds, then you're in the forward 50, so it's a kick. If you're in your defensive zone and you roll a 1, you'll move to the midfield, so you don't kick there, you just play on and get the next action. If you're in the defensive zone and you lose, then the opposition are in their forward zone and they would get a kick at goal, and you'd follow the kicking instructions to see whether they scored or got behind or nothing happened. So that is the centre bounds and action 10, out of bounds. So we've had our centre bounce and we've decided who's got the ball, and we roll our 2 yellow dice for the action, and it comes up with a 2. And on the action chart, 2 highlight reel. We're going to deal with these one at a time. Many of them are the same, but if I do it one at a time, then we see exactly what's going on. So we go to the highlight reel chart, and as you can see at the top, if you're using all the coloured dice, you need the yellow, green, white and black. So you can roll them all at once if you wish, and then you can read them. 5. Let's say we're in midfield. It says torpedo kick, goal for midfielder with highest goal rating. So you would look at the midfield players and look who's got the most number of stars. If they're tied, you can roll the dice or just decide, or give it to the one that's got the highest play rating, or whatever you want to do. And that is a goal. As you can see, obviously, if we'd rolled a 4 and we were in the defensive 50, long run leads to mark, question mark, black dice, white dice. And what that means is you're going to try and mark, and we're going to come on to marks, and it's going to be the black dice will tell you who's kicking the ball, and the white dice who is going to tell you who is receiving the kick to try and make a mark, and you resolve the mark, as we will talk about in one of the future videos. The only other thing about this is if you roll snake eyes double 1, rare play, and what you do there is we've got a rare play chart at the bottom. You roll again, 7, specky, offensive player in current zone with the highest mark rating makes a spectacular mark. If in the forward 50 he gets a kick at goal, otherwise moves into the next zone. Mark to player, white dice. So it tells you what colour dice to use. The other thing in here, it says injury to offense, green player. See injury chart. There isn't an injury chart. I talked to Chris about this, and effectively what you do is you roll the dice, and that tells you how many games he's going to be injured for. And whether there is going to be an injury chart in the future or not, I don't know. But as I'm playing as played, what I do is if that comes up, then I just bring the emergency player on for that player, and that player is out of the game for the rest of the game. So that is action 2 highlight reel. Action 3, bouncing ball, offense quality versus defense quality. This is one of your challenges, and if you're using the advanced challenge, you will need the red dice. But as you can see, offense quality, defense quality, and then you need the green dice. So you roll the green dice, 3, and it says 1% versus star. So the team with the ball, let's say that we're in the forwards for Sydney, you would go along and count up their 1%, and there's a half. You then go to the defenders of their opponents and you count up the star, and if that is only a half, then Sydney win, unless you use the advanced rule, in which case it's a 1 to 4, Sydney win, 5 and 6 the opponents win. If on the other hand they don't have any, it's less than 1, therefore it's still 1 to 4, Sydney would win, or 1 to 4 on the red dice would win if you're using the advanced. If their opponents had 2.5 of star quality, then they would be the ones that win the challenge, unless you're using the advanced rule, and only a 6 in that case, because it's more than 2 or more, 1 to 5. So Sydney would only win if they rolled a 6, otherwise it would go to the opponents. Now once you've done that, you need the blue dice, and it depends on what area you are in at the time. So forwards, we're in the offenses forward 50, so you roll. In this case it doesn't make any difference, because on a bouncing ball, if the offense wins, it's always a kick. The tick tells you to roll the dice to see who's going to take a kick. 52 would be Samuel Wicks, and you would follow the kicking rules. If the defense won it in that zone, as you can see, possession goes to the defense in their defensive 50, so they would take over, and effectively the dice would move over to this side, because this is the defensive line. Now if it's one of the if it's in the defensive 50, remember here that the offense is the team with the ball. So if we were here, Sydney would be the offense, but they're in their own defensive 50. So if they win, you roll the dice and it says 5, and you're looking against here, it says advance to midfield, so that would move to there and you'd start the next action. If it was 1 or 2, then it would stay in defense and they would do the next action. If the defenders won and it's 1 to 3, then they take possession in the forward 50. If it's a 4 to 6, then they take possession and they kick at goal, and you would roll the 2 dice and then follow the kick rules to see what the result of the kick was. If it's in midfield and the offense win, then it's a mark from midfield to forward, and if it's successful, then that dot tells you that there's a kick for the person who makes the mark. The defensive wins, then you've got all these 3 different options, but effectively green dice tells you work out the challenge. If you're going to use the advanced rule, you might need the red dice, and then the blue dice will give you the result of the play, and that is the bouncing ball. So action 4 is the mark, and this is where a player will kick the ball in the air and hope that one of his teammates will catch the ball and mark the ball. It means that the play stops and they can move on forward, a bit like a mark in rugby union, but if you want to see it, then go and watch a game. There's loads and loads of marks in every game. So for this you need the black dice and the white dice, and the way this works is, let me just move this in. See, I can see enough players there. So you roll the black dice and the white dice, and it says, first of all, you look at this section, so you may need the blue dice. If you're in defense, you have to roll, and 1 to 3 will be a defender to a defender mark, so they're playing in the same zone. 4 to 6 will be defender to midfield. So let's say that Kennedy had the ball and we roll this and it's a 2, then let's make that a 4 because Kennedy's got the ball. Then he would be trying to kick the ball to Callum Mills because they're both in defence. If that number is a 4, the white dice is a 4. If you get doubles, you roll that dice again until you get something that isn't. So 4 to 3, so it's going to be Kennedy to Dawson, and what you do is you take the kick rating of the person from the black dice, Kennedy 1, and you take the mark rating of the person that's going to receive the kick 2, add them together and you get 3, and then you roll the green dice, and if it's less than 3 then the mark is successful and they continue. If it's greater than 3 then it's a loose ball, but let's say it continued, then this is the end of the mark and you do a new action. But there is a rule change in place that would allow you to then say, well, I want to mark on, because in general in the game you'll see somebody kick a mark and then they can quickly kick it onto somebody else and get another mark. So defense to defense here, what I do is I will roll a dice, and if it's a 5 or a 6 then they're going to mark on. So if he rolls a 5, then Dawson has got the ball and he's going to mark into the next area, which is the midfield. So you only need to roll the white dice, which is a 3, and it can be the same because it's in a different section, and you do the same thing. 3 0 mark is a 3, so you roll that 2 and it's good. And again you could do the same thing. You could try and mark on into the forward section, so you've got a 2 against a 4, which is a 6, and you roll it, and that would be a good mark. The thing to notice about a mark is a 1 is always a successful mark. So if you've got somebody who's got a 0 kick like Hewitt, and you've got someone that's got a 0 mark like Cunningham, if you roll a green dice 1, then it is successful regardless. Similarly, if you've got a kick rate of 3 like Dane Rampe, and you've got a mark rate of 4 giving you 7, and you roll the green dice and it is a 6, it is always a failed mark. If you get into the forward zone with a mark, you always get a kick at goal. If you get a mark in any other zone and you don't mark on, then you just move to the next action. So let's assume that the mark has failed. Let's say we're going from Lloyd to Rampy and it fails. So the ball is in the mid section now. You then roll the dice and it's a 1. So you're looking at the loose ball section here. 1 is 1%, 2 and 3 clear, 4, 5, 6 skill. And you take the area of the field you're in and you add them up. And if the number is greater than the opponent's count of that trait, then the team with the ball will keep the ball in the new zone. If it's less, then it will go over to the other team in that same zone. The only difference of course is if you're using the advanced challenge, you would roll to see if it was 1 to 4, 1 to 5 dependent on the number. And as you can see, if you're going from mid to forward, it's got a dot, and down at the bottom here it says if the mark is successful, kick at goal for mark taker. So if Rampy is kicking to Franklin and Franklin makes a successful mark, he automatically gets a kick at goal. And similarly, if you're in the forward zone, you're going to do a forward to forward mark, and it's the same as the defense mark, where if these two numbers are the same, you'd have to roll the white dice to get a different number because you can't kick it to yourself. Although in theory you can, but you don't often see that. So that is the mark rule. Action roll 6, the crash. So we rolled an action roll of 6 and it's a one-on-one situation for a crash, but you need the green dice, so you roll the dice and you have the offensive player at position 3 and the defensive player at position 2, and the 5 tells you what you're going to check against. It's a bit like the bounce, but it's an individual player. So for the offense you would check the player's skill, for the defense you would check the player's clear. If you need the red dice, if you're using the advanced challenge rule, then you'll need to roll that, and on the outcome, again dependent on which part of the field you are in, you roll the blue dice and that will give you the result of that play for the team that wins the ball. If it's the offense and they're in midfield, they will mark from midfield to forward. If it's the offense and they're in the forward zone, then they will kick at goal. Otherwise, you look and see what is happening with the blue dice and you follow that instruction, and that is the crash. So we roll a 7 and we get ground blast. So anybody who's played any of the blast games from play will know about the blast rule. It takes a number of minutes off the game and certain things can happen during that time. In Footy Blast it's no different. you roll a 7, you use the green dice, and that tells you the number of minutes that are coming off the time. So 1 will be 2 time segments because they're 30-second segments, 2 will be 4, yada yada yada, up to 6 minutes, which will be 12. The number you roll also determines what skill you are checking against. So again, if we're in midfield and we roll a 2, we're going to look at tackle for both teams. You count up the tackles, you work out the challenge, whether you're going to just take the highest, or if they're even, give it to the offense, or you play the advanced challenge rule. Either way, what that tells you is who is going to go for a chance to kick a goal. The team that lose get a chance to get something off the missed kick chart. The team that win get a kick at goal. And the way this works, so let's say that whoever Sydney's playing lose the, I'm just bringing this chart in because it's got the kick information in, lose the challenge, and so they will go first. You roll the dice and that will tell you who is kicking the ball, who's going to get the missed kick opportunity. Doesn't matter whether they've got a star or not, that is the player that's getting it on the missed kick and the first opportunity to score. You then need the 2 yellows and the black, and you follow the missed kick rule. So a 4 with a 1, somebody's actually scored a goal, and it says goal who chart, and the who chart is the numbers on these thing here. You can roll it again if you wish, or you can take 76, and they have scored. Very rare that you score on the miss chart, but there you go, it's a score. Now after you've done the team that loses the challenge, you have to do the team that wins the challenge, and the difference is you also need the green dice. But the first thing is to decide who's taking the kick. You roll the dice. 65, if it's Sydney, it would be Tom Hickey. But here's the kicker: if it was 79, Harry Cunningham, he hasn't got a star, and a player without a star cannot take a ground blast kick. So you roll it again. You must get somebody with a star. 17, Isaac Heaney, 3 stars. And the reason for this is because it's a blast, they get a bonus for winning the blast and getting the kick. If they have 1 star, they get an additional 1 star. So Justin McInerney here, if he won it, his kick star rating would be from 1 to 2. If you have more than 1 star, like Isaac Heaney, he's got 3, you get an additional 2. So that would mean that Isaac Heaney can get up to 5 to score a goal. So you then roll, you can roll these, because if he misses you're going to need the black and the yellow dice. So you roll it, 2, he scores a goal. Now if you rolled a 6, you would then go to the miss chart and you do the same thing as you would on a normal miss. Miss goal to the right, a behind for kicker. Isaac Heaney gets a behind. Now 2 things to look at this. The way I play it, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, is the team that kick is the last action in that time period. So if it was a 2-minute blast, then the last action of the 2-minute blast was this kick or this miss. If the goal is scored, then I would go to the centre and do a centre bounce. If it's a behind or a miss, then the ball belongs to the defence in their own defensive 50, and they would then roll for an action in the next time zone. Now the other thing about the blast, and I brought this up in the substitutions, is that if the blast takes you over the 11 minutes of a quarter, then you would complete the blast and then you would do your substitutions, and this gives you a real advantage. If it goes over, you can substitute your better players because they've got less time off the field. So if you've got like Franklin here and the blast took you in, say, 3 minutes into the bottom half of that period, he's only going to be off the field for 7 minutes. So substitute him because you got less time without him. That's just something I sort of picked up as I was playing. So that is the ground blast. So action 8, tackle. So a tackle, if you remember, we talked about, where's my white dice gone? Oh, there it is. We talked about the crash, which was 1-on-1, and the green dice would tell us what the traits were. A tackle is exactly the same, with one exception, in that when you roll the black and white dice, the black dice is the team on offense, team with the ball, and it is always his disposal rating, and the defense is always his tackle rating. So there is no green dice. You roll them, work out who's the win, do the challenge, whichever way you do it, if you want to use the dice, and that will give you the result, and then the blue dice will use to decide what happens on the chart. And generally, if the defense win, in fact every time that if the defense wins, which is the team without the ball, not the team in the defensive area, the team without the ball wins, they take possession in that area. There's nothing else. So really it's only if the offense wins do you need the blue dice. And there is a possibility, as you can see, if you're in your own defensive zone and you win and you roll 1 or a 2 on the blue dice, you have another tackle, so you would do it all again. 2 new players, so effectively you've had a tackle and the ball's come out and 2 other players have gone for the tackle, or maybe the same 2 players, so you can have a string of tackles in the same time zone. I think I had 4 in the last game that I played in one time zone. But that, in a nutshell, is the tackle. Action 9, scramble. So this is when the ball is on the ground and players are scrambling around for the ball, and it is very much like the bouncing ball process, but there is only one trait that you check against both teams. So you roll a 9 on the action and you use the green dice, and it'll tell you if it's a 1 you're going to look at 1%, if it's a 2 or a 3 you're going to look at clear, 4, 5, 6 you're going to look at skill. So dependent on which area you're in, it is a team trait that you're counting. So you take the 6 players from that area, and if in this case it's a 2, you would count the clears up for the team with the ball and the clears up for the teams without the ball, work out who it is that has won the contest. Again, if you're going to use the advanced rule, you'd use the red dice, and then from that you use the blue dice as we do everywhere else, and it will tell you the result of that play. And that, in a nutshell, is the scramble. Those eagle-eyed ones of you will notice that we don't have a action 10 because that was covered in the centre bounce. It's the out of bounds is 10, so we're back in with action 11, ball in the air, offensive quality versus defensive quality, and it's got a remarkable similarity to the bouncing ball. You roll the green dice and it says if it's a 4 you want the team in control of the ball in possession will check the clear, The team who are on the defence, i.e. without possession of the ball, will check the skill, count them up. Winner gets the challenge, whether you use just the numbers or you use the red dice, and then you roll the blue dice, and dependent on where you are on the field is what happens with that play. Obviously if you're in the forward 50, then you can see there's no need for the blue dice, because the team that have got the ball will kick at goal, and if the team that don't have the ball get the ball, it's advanced to midfield and they will play from there. So that is action 11, ball in the air. And we come to the final action, action 12, on the run. So this is where a player has picked up the ball and he's running with the ball and bouncing the ball and trying to get extra yards before deciding to try and mark the ball. What you need to do here is firstly roll the blue dice, and it's dependent on where you are in the field. Like most of them, you roll the dice and it will tell you what will happen. Now if you're in midfield and you roll a 5 or 6, or you're in the forward zone and you roll a 5 or 6, then the defense will take the ball and they will get a mark opportunity, and you add 1 to the count of the kicker's kick rating and the marker's mark rating. So if it's kick of 2 and a mark of 1, that's 3, plus the 1 is 4. Remembering that when you check for the mark, a 1 is always successful, a 6 is always unsuccessful. Others may tell you to advance or whatever, but only those two, the midfield and the forward 5 and 6 blue dice, will require you to use the black and white dice to work out who the kick and the mark player are. Otherwise you just follow the instructions and move on to the next action roll, and that is on the run. So finally, keeping time and scoring. So here on this side is a blank score sheet, and you've got the 4 periods, 20 minutes, so there's 40 sections. As I said before, the yellows just indicate where the substitutions are. Got the home team, away team, and the 4 periods and the final score. On this side is a game that I've played, and what I do is if a team score a goal, I put a mark at the top of their box. If they score a behind, I put a mark at the bottom of their box, and at the end of the period I just add them up. 4 goals, 4 behinds gives us 28 points. And then in the second period of this game, Sydney only scored 2 behinds, and so it's a cumulative 4-6, and then 1 and 5 gives us 5-11, and 2 and 0 gives us 7-11, and that's how I keep the score on the score sheet. With the timing, you move on every time you roll on the action card, or you do a centre bounce. So here, as you can see, the first 30 seconds we had a bounce, there was a ruck. Sydney won it in midfield. It was then followed by 7. I put the number of the action down. 7 is a blast, and the blast lasted for 5 minutes, so I put a line all the way down. That's 10 sections. And then when we decide who lost and who won the challenge, Adelaide lost, Sydney won the challenge. So Adelaide rolled against the missed kick chart and they got a behind. Sydney scored a goal off their chance, and then of course, because the goal was the last thing scored, we go back to a bounce, and here Sydney won in the forward 50, which means that we must have rolled a blue 1. They took a kick and Hinckley actually scored a behind. Adelaide then start from their own defensive 50 and they had a mark which failed, so they were using the D20 rule. Adelaide won the ball back in a loose ball and they're in the D50. Then action 2, which is the highlight reel, Sydney ended up in the forwards 50, and so on and so forth. So in the second period, as you can see here, we had a ground blast which lasted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. So it crossed this substitution line. So complete the blast and then do the substitutions, and at this point I would have looked for people like, if they've got a 4 or a 3 or even a 5 star forward, I would have taken him off here because he's only got that much time to use in his stint as being off the field. So that's just a bit of information for you. If you're playing this game, it's not always, don't always keep your best players on. If something like this happens, get them off because they're going to be off the field less. But yeah, everything goes. We got a bounce, then a 7, which is the ground blast. A 4 is a mark. 6 would have been a crash, and so on and so forth. So I can see what happened in the game, and that is how I fill my score sheets out and keep the track of what happened in the game.